at you and we congratulate you. First of all, I would encourage everyone who has the ability to turn their video on. We really want each of you to be present and engaged in this collective of perspectives and thoughts. And so if you can do that, we would greatly appreciate that. I also want to share with you before we get into who we are and our role as co-chairs is to ask that you understand that all of our meetings are video live streamed and that it's open to the public so anyone can view our meeting. And then the videos will be saved. So you will be able to go to the Columbus City School District's website and click on the Safe Schools link if you want to view the recording of today's session or any other session. Again, this is a very important role that you've signed up for. It's a short-lived group that's going to have 3 meetings. And our task is essentially to shape what we believe safe schools should look like in the 21st century to ensure the emotional and physical safety of our students, our staff, our families and communities that are in our facilities. We want to make sure that we help plan what that's going to look like. I have the distinct honor of introducing our 2 facilitators, Fran Frazier, who's an independent education school climate consultant, and Chris Cloth, who's a principal and senior consultant of ChangeWorks of the Heartland. They will both facilitate these meetings, and they have a long working and lived experience here in Columbus, Franklin County. So they know our Columbus City School District, they know the community, and they will be able to help us move through this 3-meeting assignment. And I want to re-emphasize that the plan is to have 3 meetings, which we shared those. Today's meeting, October the 1st, Thursday, October the 15th, and Thursday, October the 29th from 6 until 8 p.m. The 15th and the 29th, today's meeting will go from 6 until 8:30. As co-chairs, Kimberly and I will help set the context as I shared in the letter, but we're also going to be helping to monitor the chat box and helping to address any issues and help to facilitate the breakout sessions that'll happen later. I also want to ask you again to make sure that you keep your video on, so that we can see your wonderful faces and we can hear your perspectives and we can get to know each other from now until the 29th. We want to assist our Columbus City School Board and District Administration in developing a 21st century safe school. With that, I'm going to turn it over to our facilitators.
My name is Chris, and just for a quick minute, I don't want to make the assumption that everyone is equally familiar with Zoom, so I just want to say, if you're looking at the bottom of your screen, you should see that there's a mute button for link for you to make yourself heard. There's a video. If you move over to participants, if you click on participants, you can see who the participants are. And more importantly, if you want to change your name, you can hover over your picture and you may see 3 dots or you may see more, but in any case, that's where you can go to rename yourself. The chat function is listed there. And the other thing about participants is if you look at the bottom of the square for participants, it has yes, no, go slower, go faster. There are ways to raise your hand and so on. So if you want to call our attention to the call on you, we could, that's where you can do that. And then you also have a reactions box where you can click on that, and there are a number of reactions you can share. So with that, Fran.
Evening. Really excited about having you here. I am going to share our agenda tonight. So cross your fingers. Hope this goes really well. It did go really well a minute ago when we tried this out. I have no idea what happened. I have no idea.
We can see your screen. We can see your Google email.
I know.
So you're on the right place.
Right, right. This is really bad. I had it all set up. I'm not sure what happened. Apologize for this.
Fran, is your PowerPoint link down at the bottom?
No, it's not. Oh, wrong one. No, it's not at the bottom where it should be. Oh my goodness. Let's see if this. I really apologize for this. Here we go. You know, when we tried this out a minute ago, it was.
Jennifer Chamberlain.
There you go.
Do we see it now?
Yes.
All right.
I think it was intended for my council member and it came through.
Okay.
But
If you can mute yourself, that would be great. Whoever is
Mitch Brown
talking.
about wanting safe streets to continue for the east side. You see that?
All right. So anyway, today, tonight, our agenda is designed to build a foundation for our dialogue on what it will take to create this 21st century model of safety and support that Charlita talked about. A model that focuses on the physical and emotional well-being of students and staff at Columbus City Schools. So tonight, we're going to ask you to share your stories of what a safe school environment was for you, what it felt like. We're going to look at some of the major concerns you have about how we actually create this kind of safe school environment. And we won't be able to do it all tonight, but that's why we've set up these 3 meetings so that, and President Adair has us on a fast track because she actually wants to get something going. So we're gonna start it out as best we can tonight. You're also gonna have a little homework, but it won't be a lot, but something that will get you prepared for our next session, which is October 15th. So our goal together with you is to have something concrete and substantive for our co-chairs and you to present to President Adair and the school board in November. Given that, if it's okay with you, we wanted to set up some group agreements for how we were going to honor our time together. We really appreciate you being with us, and especially for this first meeting, we just wanted to take a little extra time. The other 2 meetings will be from 6 to 8, but we wanted to have a little extra time so that we literally could do our best to build community, even if it's through Zoom. We know that some of you may know each other. We know that some of you may have even worked with each other, but as an entire group, none of us have been together as we are now. So we're asking that you be present and engaged. We know for you that may be difficult, and you might be missing your stories tonight, but we'd like for you to at least be present and engage with us tonight. that you would speak for yourself and not for others, that you would be open and honest, hopefully seek first to understand where someone is coming from rather than to be understood. Respect each other's opinions, be mindful of your facial expressions since this is Zoom, so we're really close. We can see exactly what you might be even thinking. Be careful not to slump a little bit so that we can see your whole beautiful face. And then basically we'd love for you just to enjoy this process and to be a part of this process, to actually share your opinions, because we won't be doing all the talking. We have designed this so that you're doing all the talking. So I think that's it. And we can add or subtract from these, but at least we wanted to have some group agreements so that we can honor the time that we are giving to this process. So I just wanted to check in to see if these group agreements are okay with people. You can raise your hand, there's a reaction button, or you can just holler out, yeah, it works, or not. And then we can add something if you want. All right, Chris, I think it's on you to get started.
Okay,
I'm not sure why this won't allow me to do this better, but go right ahead.
well, so what we'd like to do initially, in order to make sure that we are making the best of your time, is to find out from you what you really need to get from tonight in order to feel as though your time was well spent. So for example, I'll know that my time was well spent if everyone was able to participate in a way that is respectful. And wanting to hear from others of you, what are the things that you're, will let you know that your time was well spent with us tonight. And feel free to speak up.
So is it okay if they unmute themselves and?
Yes.
Okay.
Alrighty, I'll go. I think my time could be well spent here if we can all have a great discussion and we can all acknowledge everybody's experiences and such.
Good, thank you.
Hey everyone, this is Amna. I don't know if you can hear me or see me. I think you can. I guess the thing that's not clear to me, so like this being clear to me is important for me to feel like this was successful, is I still feel like there has been no information shared about like, what are we doing and what is our role with regard to this fundamental, I mean, imagining 21st century safety. I mean, I understand that generally, but like, there's a very particular question that's been raised by students protesting and people all over the country protesting over the summer. And as much as I'm really looking forward to talking to everyone and hearing from them, I think like this is the third meeting I've been at and none of them has it been clear, like what is the end product? Like what is the scope of our advice? How seriously will the school board take it? Has the school board already made some decisions? Are they functioning within some parameters? And, as someone who is trained as a lawyer and teaches at the law school, like there's no way to meaningfully participate in this process, or it doesn't feel meaningful because it feels like every meeting is treated like a community meeting. And as much as I appreciate being able to talk to other people, like without there being a clear, I signed up to give my time to this so that we could do something together. And this is like, it's not clear, it's not transparent at all to me. It's not clear to me. And I would really appreciate some clarity around like, what are we doing in these 3 meetings? Are we creating some kind of report and recommendations? Is there a consensus-based process for that? Who's going to author that? All those kinds of things. Without those like basic questions of the parameters of this process, it just feels like a waste of time, to be honest. And I'm getting frustrated by having spent 3 evenings with this group and still having no clarity on what. And so then it just feels like an attempt to quell the student protest, which honestly, I'm not interested in participating in quelling student protests. The students have brought very real demands that represent a lot of energy in the city and around the country for rethinking the role of police in our communities and our schools. And I would like to see how can we take them seriously in this process. Otherwise, it just doesn't seem like worth, I don't understand what we're doing.
Thank you. And Amna, we will address that. And as soon as we find out what the other expectations are, I will come back to that. So you will know what we know about the direction we're going and why we're going in that direction.
Others?
Well,
Hi, my expectation is that we will have actual strategies and things that can be actually implemented in our schools for the safety of all, not just pie in the sky things, but actual things and people and things that are actionable.
Thank you. Who else?
Hi, my name is Mercy Ayabusi. My expectation for this meeting today is that not only will we be honest and keep things clear, but that we actually are productive today. Like Amna said, I don't want to waste my time coming to all these meetings just to have nothing done or nothing productive at all.
Thank you.
I wanted to also add to that. Hi, my name is Kaden Burston. I'm a student, and there are very few students on this task force, which obviously I don't agree with because I feel like as this is an issue that is concerning students, there's very little of us to represent the entirety of CCS. And I want to know what's going to be done to make sure that our voices are centered in this conversation, as it is us who are being affected, and what we're going to do to center student voices and actually listen to our experiences. Because I feel like with these past few meetings or community sessions, as you guys called them before, our voices have not been centered at all.
Thank you.
Hi, I'll go next. Dimitri Johnson here. I'm not going to repeat everything that other people have said. So I think I would feel at the end of this meeting, my time was well spent if we are able to center our focus, our discussion, our priority around students, their needs, their voices, their concerns. And then I will feel like my time has been well spent.
Thank you. Who else?
My name's Julia Handelman, and as a teacher, we plan backwards with the expectation of what it would look like for a student to achieve something right in our classrooms. So I wonder if we have the similar process, if we have a three session schedule, that we might plan backwards from what it will look like at the end of that third session, that we would all feel valued and that we would have those actionable items to present. So that just means having the objective first and then planning backwards from that.
Sure. Anyone else?
I'll go next. I am Sandra Lopez. I work for Columbus City Council in community engagement during the day and participate in a lot of community meetings and in different groups. Before coming into that role, I worked in gun violence prevention for Sandy Hook Promise, which is an organization that works to reduce gun violence in the schools by addressing the needs of mental wellness, reduce bullying, and create a positive environment in the schools. And I pretty much have been to schools in every county in Ohio, including schools that had mass shootings. And so I am very, very committed to keeping our students safe, keeping the schools safe, but also because I know is a reflection of the communities and the neighborhoods and the streets around the schools. So I'm hoping also that we can keep in mind families, parents who don't speak English as a first language. Their voices are often not included in these conversations. So I also hope to be an advocate for their needs. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I can go next. My name is John Price. I am an attorney who advocates for the needs of students with disabilities and their families in the special education process. So I'll feel like my time is well spent if the unique needs of students with disabilities are represented in this conversation, and that they're heard throughout this process. There's a lot of overlap between the things that we're talking about and students with disabilities because they are disproportionately impacted by a lot of these issues. So on a substantive level, that's what I would like to see. On a procedural level, I would echo some of the things that have already been stated. I would really like to come out of tonight with a concrete plan about procedurally what is going to happen next, and maybe some time frames about when they're going to happen and who's going to do what, so that we can take all these really, really great perspectives from this really nice group and really do something with it. So that's what I would like to see.
Great, thank you.
I'll go next. My name is Mariam Muhammad, and I am a student. And I think that I know that everybody has said it before, but I feel like it can't be said enough. For us to come out with a concrete plan, and not for us to just talk about it, like for action to actually be taken, and also for like when us students and the community a part of the task force, when we're talking for our ideas to actually be listened to and taken into account. And like I said, action needs to be taken, because honestly, I really don't know what we're doing. I know I missed the last couple of meetings, but I am debriefed about them after they happened. I don't know what we're doing. I have not seen any action taken. I have not seen any progress made with the school board or with the task force. So really, I just want things to get done.
We need to be very clear about that as we hear from the rest of you. And as Fran said, we'll be coming back to clarify that once we hear from as many of you as want to speak up.
Hi, I'm Carissa Izzo. I'm a parent. So I guess I would really like to find out what the results from the first two meetings were and how they were, what parents and community members and students had brought to those two meetings. Just so that we know that we are listening to the people that attended those meetings. And I know those meetings were really hard to attend since it was like the first day school started and lots of parents were doing Zoom calls with their teachers and getting things set up. So I want to make sure that we really are listening and that we really keep reaching out to our public, because the first two meetings were quite difficult for a lot of families to attend.
Okay. Anyone else?
My name is Larry Howell. I'm a school resource officer with Columbus Police Department, and I would like to find out what the expectations are, like everyone else, what everyone's looking for. But I would also hopefully be able to find out why individuals are having such a hard time with this program and try to help them understand that the school resource officers act in a different role than the average Columbus Street police officer. And I would like to be able to convey that message to everyone.
And certainly during the course of the 3 meetings, we're going to be looking at that and a number of other issues. Who else?
Hi, I'm Amy Troyer, and I'm a parent of a child in middle school. I don't have a lot to say because I actually agree with what's been said. I want to make sure that I also really want the student voices to be heard, and get the information from the survey, and make sure we have a good, solid understanding of what people's concerns are, and ideas, and really elevating the voices of people of color, and going from there. And then, yes, getting a little more details on the process. Thank you.
Thank you. Who else? Anyone else?
I'll talk. Hi, everybody. My name is Kelly Montgomery, and my background is I was a teacher for the Columbus schools for 17 years. I've taught at Berwick Elementary on the east side. I've been on over to Eakin and over to Linden. And I feel like, and I also live in Columbus as well, and my daughter has attended high school at Fort Hayes. I left teaching last year. Some of those reasons have to do with safety, but I currently am working in the community for Family and Children First, and I've spent the last year really exploring wraparound services, trauma, and I think, you know, I've spent a lot of time connecting with agencies in the community that I wish I would have been aware of when I was a teacher, but I was overwhelmed. And when students struggled, I didn't always know what the resources were. But I feel like there are many, many resources, and we have an amazing community. And if we can all figure out, you know, when we explore safe, what safe means and have clear definitions of that, because safe to, you know, a student of color that's maybe had some negative experiences with the police might look a lot different to another student or to a parent or to a teacher. So it's a little bit of my story, but I just also want to thank you for allowing me to be on this committee and or in this work group, and I hope to have something to contribute. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else want to add their 2 cents worth?
I'll go real quick. So I got here a little late, so I'm sorry if I missed the rules, but Sean Powers, I'm a school counselor in Columbus City Schools, and I just want to echo what the students said. I want their voices, of course, to be centered and for them to be heard, and for what they brought that originally spurred this conversation to be addressed. For that to be addressed first, honestly. And, you know, I am interested in the larger conversation that we need to have. And yeah, I just want to make sure that they're listened to. I agree with I can see what they're saying about the last few meetings, about not being clear and not really, even though some of them had a chance to speak, not their opinion wasn't always necessarily the most centered, and so I'd like to see more of that.
We can clarify what has happened with the stuff from the other meetings and how it's going to be used moving forward. Anyone else?
I'm Claire Gordon. I'm a student at CCS, and I agree with what others have already said. I felt underprepared coming into this meeting because it was unclear what I had to do to prepare. So yeah, again, I would just like to see clearer directions so I can make sure I'm fully prepared.
Great, thank you. We don't need everyone to speak up, but if you want to take your chance, we'll begin to wrap this up in a moment. I want to make sure anyone who wants to contribute has a chance to. So Fran, do you want to start with the clarification? Do you want me to do part of it?
Actually, what I'd like to do first is to make sure that we heard what your expectations are. I'd like to do that. And then I'm really glad of what you said, because Chris and I, as facilitators, and the two co-chairs, Kimberly and Charlita, had a conversation with President Adair and Carol Beckerly, another school board member, about many of the issues that you brought up. So, so we'd like to share those as well. But I want to make sure I got what you said. You have expectations of a great discussion that acknowledges everyone's experience, that no real information was shared and what really is the end product here, and you would appreciate clarity. That actual strategies to be implemented in schools, that's what you're expecting, and that things are actionable, that you want this meeting to be productive. A question, what's going to be done for students? Because student voice needs to be anchored. We need to center our focus on student needs, voices, and concerns. That we need to go backwards to when we're looking at these 3-session process, so that we come up with the objective first. That the voices of parents need to be heard, as well as the voices of people of color. That students have unique needs. There are unique needs for students with disabilities, and so their needs also need to be heard. We need to have concrete plans. We need to have concrete plans for students to be actually listened to, because this person said, we want things to get better. Someone else said that they wanted the results from the first 2 listening sessions. That school resource officers, what exactly, clarifying that role of school resource officers. Student voices need to be heard, results from the survey, and getting a good idea of what people want. There needs to be some clear definitions of safety, opinions from the listening sessions and clarifications about those listening sessions, and clearer directions so that you can be prepared. I just want to make sure that I wrote down what you said. I want to make sure that, at least for this part, you were really heard about what you said. And I did my best not to rewrite anything that you said, but wrote down hopefully exactly what you said, because I think that's important. I will tell you that a couple of things did come up. We thought that we wanted to make sure that the voices of some groups that are impacted by safety within Columbus City Schools were actually heard. So we felt that there were gaps in the Latinx community, African immigrant communities, the ESL communities, the disability communities, the LGBTQ communities. And so we felt that there were also other community groups whose voices were not and are not represented in the working group members that we have right now. And so we asked if it was possible to find a way to engage that population of people into this work group. And what we were hoping is that even some of you who may be representative of certain groups would also be willing to talk with members of your community. And so school board member Carol Beckerly said that she would personally take this particular issue on, that she was going to see if the district's Department of Engagement could take the lead in gathering up affinity groups for their input, and that specific work group members who represent particular groups, you would be invited to meet with your constituents, consumers, or members to gather their comments and feedback. We also felt that homeless families and students who are transient also be represented because they have particular safety needs as well. They thought this was a great idea, and so there will be movement on that. The other thing we specifically asked about was to make sure that after these 3 sessions were over, that this would not be the end of the work group. We asked that there be an ad hoc committee that would work with the school board to make sure that whatever recommendations came up were actually going to be followed by this group who came from the working group, to make sure that if there were recommendations that came up that could be addressed right away, this group would help the board to move in that direction. Because what we do know is that many of these recommendations are going to be part of the school board's 5-year strategic plan. But we also know that you all will probably come up with ideas and strategies and suggestions that could be addressed right away. And so we asked for a creation of an ad hoc committee. President Adair really liked that idea and said that she felt that there could even be a standing committee with the board on culture and climate that would also envelop the recommendations from this ad hoc committee. So that this would, hello?
I'm sorry, can I ask a question?
Sure.
I hate to interrupt.
That's all right.
The term ad hoc, could you maybe explain what ad hoc committee means for our adults and students who may not be familiar with what that means? I can't even say I really have a clear example of, or a clear definition of what that is. I think I get what you're saying.
So I can remove ad hoc and just say that the plan is to invite members of the work group who have the time and are willing to take the recommendations, strategies, and skills that come from this particular group and will work with the board on implementing those strategies, programs, recommendations, so that there is follow up and follow through, that it won't be the end, like you hand over your recommendations at the November school board meeting and then that's it. What we wanted was an opportunity for the voices of members of the work group to continue. And what we were told today or yesterday, I think yesterday when we had this conversation, because these things came up from the facilitators and the co-chairs. So what I'm telling you is that there is an opportunity for this not to end just after we've come up with what we would like to present to the board. So that's where we are right now.
Fran, could I add a little, please?
Absolutely.
So if we're thinking about the idea of working backwards, the outcome of this 3-day process or 3-meeting process will be a document that has recommendations that reflect the dialogue that we have during those 3. There'll be your recommendations covering a number of safety related issues. And that document will go to the school board. The school board will include it in their planning process, and that also, and they are also looking to take action on anything that they can take action on quickly. If we go backwards, one of the things I'm hearing some confusion about is the listening sessions were a part of a longer process to begin to get input. And so Battelle collected all that information, and they're going to be sharing that information at the next meeting. One of the things we wanted to focus on was making sure that we get a sense of who's here and what the different perspectives are, because safety covers a lot of things, including the SROs and a lot of other things. And the idea of a 21st century safe school district needs to cover 100 and some buildings and lots of staff and teachers and students, including the high schools, but not exclusively the high schools. So there will be additional input at the next meeting that's from Battelle. They documented everything that was said during those listening sessions. In addition, you're probably aware that there's been some survey work being done to get some additional input. So that when we're doing our work, we're basing it on a cross section of the community perspectives.
Why not today?
Because it's not ready. That all of that information is not ready, actually. There's been a really big push to make sure that particular voices of students, of teachers, and more families of color are represented. And so we've been getting an update practically every day, every time a bunch of surveys are responded to, so that we're getting a better idea. Right now, I can tell you that 4,387 surveys have been, as of today, have been submitted.
I just like, it's been almost an hour that we've kind of been doing this and dancing around these questions. And I'm just concerned because we only have what, 6 more hours left together to complete the entirety of this process. And I don't know if our time is being spent wisely and what exactly we're going to do to make sure this gets done. And we're not just imagining what's going to happen and talking about it.
The focus of this meeting really was to set a foundation by getting an idea about what safe schools might look like, what your major concerns about safe schools, and getting an idea about really how would we describe what it is that we really want, so that we have a picture of it. The second meeting was to look at the important elements of a safe school, the role of neighborhoods, community assets in creating safe schools, and then the role of policing in schools and in communities. The focus of the third meeting is to actually come up with big ideas and recommendations around a safety and support model that focuses on the physical and emotional well-being of students and staff in Columbus City Schools. So that's the process that we came up with. So that, because it's a process, it's not that we can do it all tonight. The survey results won't be ready because they are still being compiled. And that's why we had a conversation tonight about when to at least stop collecting data from the surveys so that a report could be, it'll take 3 to 5 days to take all of that information and create a report. So at our next meeting on the 15th of October, that report will be ready to share with you, to give to you.
I do have one request, is if we could have the data a couple days beforehand,
If it's ready.
If
we
it's
certainly
ready, if,
will.
yeah, if it's
We
possible,
certainly will.
because that way, if we look at that data and we say, oh my goodness, we are still missing this community, you know, maybe we don't have enough students who replied, or that we can really reach out to that community, and make sure that we see everyone in that surveys.
That would be great. And truthfully, we will send it out if we get it in enough time.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you.
We'll do that. Mr. Granger, you had your hand raised.
Yes, I have a question just for clarification because I had to step away for a moment. When we mean recommendations, is this going to be a selective group of recommendations, like a certain number of recommendations, or is this going to be all recommendations that the task force comes up with? Like what is the limits on that?
I'm not sure there's a limit. Remember, our focus is to look at what would a safety and supportive environment that focuses on safety and the emotional well-being of students, what kind of model do we want to create that looks at all of those issues? So you literally could come up with 100 recommendations, and maybe they would be put into categories, however you all decide to do that. I don't think there's a limit. I think what is important is looking at an overall picture of what you describe as a safe environment for students and staff.
One way to think about this is that you'll be identifying the attributes of the system that you want. And if you look at the stuff that's going on about safe schools all across the country, there's lots of different best practices. And to the extent that you can, and not all those best practices are aligned with one another. So if you identify the attributes of the system you want, then you can also, the district can go ahead and begin to look into the particular best practices that are the best way to implement what you are suggesting or saying that you want the system to look like. And as Fran said, that could be really long. One aspect of this is by having dialogue and having different perspectives within this group, we'll have an opportunity to decide which of those things, you'll have the opportunity to decide together which of those things reflect your collective wisdom.
Kaden, you were going to say something?
Well, I was just going to ask then, how is the board just going to be choosing which ones they think is best, and then how does that make all of these meetings productive?
I think a lot of it is going to have to do with who's on this subsequent committee from the working group that works with the board around that.
My impression, and Fran and I were kind of obnoxious about what it would take to get involved in this. And it is our impression that the board, and particularly President Adair and Member Beckerly, are absolutely committed to action, not talk. But they wanted, before they took action, to listen. And that's been a slow process for those of you that feel a sense of urgency about particular issues. But it's our perception that they are committed to acting on recommendations, on your recommendations, not picking and choosing. It would be
Sorry,
more, how do we do it, not if we do it.
Mr. Granger?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I have a question. Again, just another one. What is the how can I say, like, time frame that this group or that does the board want us to come up with these recommendations? Like, what's the time frame? Are they giving us like 6 months, a year, 2 years? What's the time frame on this?
The report is due the 17th of November is when they, at that meeting, they will hear it.
All right, thank you.
Excuse me,
remember that-
but I'm sorry, but if the report is due the 17th of November, we have so very few student voices here on this task force, then how come we didn't start this sooner? How come we didn't spread the message out to other students who this is actually all about? I'm not understanding.
Exactly, and I brought up this point in the chat, and I don't think that everyone probably didn't read it or ignored it, but just that CCS has a very, very massive reach to everybody that is in CCS. So that reach was not used, that reach was not exhausted, not enough students were contacted, not enough families of those students were contacted. This group was kept kind of a secret for a very long time. And I feel like that like literally before we went to go protest at Ragland's house, this was announced, even though the group was decided 3 months ago. So this action should have been taken very, very much sooner. And there must have been more of a sense of urgency with this issue, and not that we have only 3 meetings to figure out all of this, and the report was due November 17th.
Kimberly, you wanted to?
Yes. Okay, I believe in calling a spade, okay? And I want us to all understand that none of these conversations from what is October 1st to the end of this month is to be taken lightly, or in the sense that we're not here and committed for the right reasons. We have the same concerns that you have already mentioned, and we have already had the same sentiment that we could have been working on this a little bit sooner, that's not enough the same time. So I'm going to ask that you give us a little bit of grace that we can come together as a community, because that is what's most needed at this point, to make sure that when a child walks out, and I'm speaking as a parent, when my child walks out the door, from when he leaves my house, he comes back the same way. So we need the grace as a community, that everybody who is here right now, for us to not be focused on CCS past, because if we are continuing to be focused on CCS past, we cannot get to CCS future. It is a part of the future, and we want to look at what has been done in the past to create the plan and give the recommendations, however many they may be, how truthful, how strong, and what is needed. But I do feel like if we are continuing to say what has been done wrong as far as the logistics, because those are things that we wish, as your co-chairs, as your co-facilitators, that we had to give to you guys, we would have already provided that as well too. But that is something that we also cannot, because we didn't give you the information, we can't give it to you as well too. We cannot give you what we don't have. What we can give you, at least I can say from your co-chairs and your co-facilitators, is that none of these topics, conversations, listening sessions, and tonight's discussion does not hit home for all of us. And when I mean hit home, I mean it hits home. I may not have the exact experience that you may have, or you may have as a teacher, or your role, or as a student, but to some degree, we have the same experience, that at the end of the day, safety, emotional, physical, and well-being needs to be addressed. And we do have 2 board members that have been in constant conversation of saying, we want to get these recommendations, so whatever we can implement in the short term, we can, and whatever we need to implement in the long term, because it needs to be fixed. And so I am hoping that we can get through tonight's discussion and get through the topics to figure out exactly what can we look like, that when we submit recommendations, it is so that every child who walks out of their house, regardless if you live on the west side, if you live in Linden, if you live on the south side, or you live in Clintonville, you are coming back home because your safety and security matters to your academic well-being self. And so I'm asking for a little bit of grace that we can try to get through tonight's agenda, so that we can focus on trying to figure out how we can come together, because if we continue to all wallow in our frustrations, I feel that we will not be able to give the recommendations that have been long overdue and what we all desire to be. We can collectively look at, we've already been looking at student voices of how we can implement that. And at best, we have your emails. So if there's some specific things that you already have, this is what this group is for. So if there's another way that you have a way to send out the student voices that maybe we don't know how to target, then please put it in the chat so that we can get that taken care of. It's not that we don't want to do the work or we're not here to do the work. We may not know what is best, but that is why you are here. And so we can figure out how we can have everybody come together so that we can create this model so that when 10 years from now, the students who come, the teachers who come, the families who come into the district will not feel the same way of how we're feeling tonight.
This is Charlita. I just want to add a couple of other points the co-chair just raised. We are looking for more ways to get more voices so that our recommendations can be as representative and as clear as possible. There were over 360 individuals who wanted to be on this working group. That's why we had the listening sessions prior to tonight's meeting. They weren't selected to be on the working group. You could only have so many people on a group to come up with recommendations. Each of us are on this group so that we can bring a perspective to the recommendations. But we also want to make sure we get those additional voices, those additional student voices. That's why all of us are trying to get the survey out to as many people as possible. The district has done its outreach through their connections, their engagement office. Each of us should be sending the survey out to our networks, whether they're adults, whether they're students, whether they're staff of the district, or community members, community partners. That's the survey instrument is going to inform the discussion that we continue to have with this 40+ member group to make the recommendations. And then to go out to groups, whether they're racial ethnic communities, whether they're student groups, whether they're parent groups, to get even more information. That's what we're trying to do, so that this 40+ group doesn't feel like they have to share the perspective of everybody else. We want to gather as much information as possible, but to be a group that can really work on developing recommendations, we had to have a cutoff, and that's why we have this 40+ group.
If there are like a certain number of people allowed on the task force, then why do the adults outnumber the students if this is supposed to be for the students and our voice? And like Kaden said in the chat, and he also said it again, why was the task force kept such a secret? Why weren't you guys reaching out to students?
And I also just want to add before we start spiraling again that it's not that we're focusing on CCS's past or that we are just like venting our frustrations. It's that there are clearly issues where the fact that we spent an hour asking questions that not enough is being clarified for us. There's not a solid plan as to what we're doing yet, or at least we haven't been told whether that solid plan is. There's a lot wrong with what's going on right now, and people raising their questions and it not being answered is not us just venting our frustrations and focusing on CCS's past. This is what CCS is right now. This is what we're dealing with.
And you know what? That is completely 100% valid. And if it came across and translated that way, that's not necessarily my full charge from that. Just being 100% honest. Once again, when I mean that I cannot give you what we do not have, if we found out about the task force a little bit before you found out about the task force, then I can only contact you about the task force. And so right about now, Ms. Fran had mentioned some of the same things that you guys mentioned as far as expectations. You know, at the end of the day, we're trying to figure out is what are your expectations? This is not a recommendation that it is Kimberly and Charlita's recommendation. This is a recommendation of what exactly you guys want to see. And we're trying to figure out exactly what does this look like? And rather maybe just saying that we're going to give you a meeting, because I don't know, in my experience, when somebody just gives me a full directive, we wanted to kind of be a little bit more inclusive and openness to have that opportunity to find out exactly where were you coming from, so that the meeting would feel like you had more of your voice and your impact rather than us telling you exactly point A, point B, point C. So so if it wasn't as stern and direct, the overall goal is to find models, because there's more than one, that are best suited for CCS families, staff, and students. That is the overall charge. What is the immediate effect is that we need to figure out individually where everyone is at, and collectively how we can come together so that we can start to get this work done in these 3 meetings.
One thing I want to appreciate is that you are raising your issues. One reason why Fran and I didn't want to jump right into details and content is we had a feeling that there were a lot of concerns and feelings that hadn't surfaced yet that were important to hear, and we need to be aware of those in order to move forward. If we're going to be working together, we need to know what that energy is. And so thank you for sharing all of that, because we do take it seriously, and we'll be taking your suggestions and your comments into consideration as we keep planning this process.
Anybody else have anything they want to, something's come up for them right now?
The first meeting, a really good presentation. Cheryl Ward and other staff, some of the terminology, and I don't know if everyone who's here tonight had a chance to attend the first. It'd be helpful if those were recorded, they can be sent out.
Ms. Lopez.
So those are talking the same thing. Yes.
I do want to say that all of those meetings are recorded, and they're on the CCS website.
Okay.
And
I think
just like this one is being recorded now.
So that will be full if you can get a chance to participate in those. People who's about, the more voices, the better. But oftentimes, as someone who works in community engagement, I know that oftentimes not everyone who is invited responds to the invitation. And I am concerned for the students who feel that not all the voices are being heard. So I'm wondering if we need to extend or have an additional meeting, if that's a possibility. If we decide, hey, we need more time, the 17th of November is not gonna cut it, is there a chance to extend it?
I think that's something we can look into. I know that President Adair wanted to make sure that the board meeting in November was actually going to be the time when at least some of the recommendations you're thinking would be presented. And probably before, I don't know whether that's the last board meeting or not of the year. But I know she wanted to not delay. But if this group feels that, I do know that in us talking with Member Beckley and President Adair about the need to make sure that communities that didn't seem to be represented would be represented in there. So they were looking at a time frame between now and the end of the month of October of making sure that there were opportunities to get input from those groups.
I have a quick question.
In addition to the work group. Mr. Kennedy, yes.
Is it possible for, and I'm not sure if this is happening or not, but is it possible for teachers to be sharing this information with students right now in class? Can they be answering these survey questions and having these discussions in class right now that we can really start getting in their input like in real time?
So that was sent to the board. That was sent over for that information to be disseminated to. So just when we talk about student voices, initially when we had a survey, we realized that we were already missing gaps of people. We tried to create a video and other alternative methods to try to make it more inclusive and to gain additional feedback. And so it's a suggestion that has last been sent over is to ask that right about now, CCS Families Use Class Dojo, for that to be implemented there, for the parent portal and the student portal for that survey to be there before students click attendance, as well as for that maybe to be completed in the social studies class and have that conversation for that survey. So those things have been sent over before the end of last week. We started to see a little bit of the numbers move, but once again, still not capturing a full scope of what we had already felt was missing from this conversation. But so yes, and we're waiting to hear feedback to see when that action will be completed. But yes, thank you, Mr. Kennedy.
Excuse me. CCS really has tried exhausting their resources on trying to share this information with students. How come this is not even being sent to their emails? You see, each CCS student has a Columbus City Schools email that could be easily accessed and sent emails to. So how come a survey has not been sent to my student email?
That suggestion was sent along as well too. But the working group, as we're giving recommendations, we send that information over. And we're waiting for those actions to be completed so that it can capture. I was hoping tonight that one of you would tell me that you've completed the survey so that we know that that action has been completed, but that lets me know that that hasn't. So that's a follow-up for the co-chairs and co-facilitators to find out exactly as well too.
As a parent, I received it through Infinite Campus.
You did receive it?
Yes.
Okay,
And I
so we had three.
As a parent, that's how I filled it out. I got it through the CCS campus. So, and I'll double check my son's email too. But I know as a parent, I received the survey.
Okay, and so we've been hearing from different outlets that it went out to all different channels, different ways. We just have not heard back collectively. And this is why we're having this meeting, to know exactly who's actually receiving this information as well too.
Maybe, I don't know if we could do this, is to send it out to students' email and have their homeroom teachers have them open their email and then have it do it first thing in the morning. I don't know if that would be possible to ask of the homeroom teacher.
I will send that out and send the email.
Okay, I agree. That would be great. I mean,
I have a quick question as well. I've just thought of this as we've been talking about, outreach and who's got what and how. Has there been any suggestions that contemplate families who don't have regular or even any internet access and how we can get to those families or students? There's plenty of children who have yet to log in this year because they don't have technology or anything like that. How do we, or has anyone contemplated that? And if so, what is that? Or how do we as a work group figure out how to get somebody to fill out the survey that's not through a link?
And that's fair. That's why we realized that we also, with our homeless population that Ms. Fran had mentioned, that we know that we have families that need alternative methods of communication to make sure as well too. we sent over a list of suggestions. And if there's any other suggestions that, like I said, once again, maybe because we don't have the correct answer. So if there's a better method that you may have, Ms. Johnson, please let us know so that we can, when we re-follow up, we can also say, well, here's also another way as well too.
Hello, I have a question.
Yes. Mr.
Again, regarding the recommendations that this group coming together will make to present to the school board, are we looking for the school board to enforce these recommendations, or not like enforce, but are we looking for them to push or at least look into them, to at least applying them to the CCS district along CCS schools? Or are we just giving something to them so that, I mean, not to be rude, but like toss aside that they could just look at and be like, oh, there's recommendations, and they put it to the side for later? Or are we looking for them to, like, once they see these recommendations, start doing things about what we're asking of them?
That's the plan, Mr. Granger, that they would actually move on it, which is the reason why we asked for a committee of the work group to work with the board around the recommendations that come from this group, so that that process doesn't get thrown to the side. That's the plan. The plan is that there will be a group of the work group who will work with the board on getting these recommendations or suggestions actually implemented.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry if that came off as a little harsh. I was just trying to make sure.
Okay.
It was a misunderstanding for me. I was trying to make sure that we were just not giving them information or recommendations without them actually doing something about what we're asking. I'm sorry if that came off a little bit harsh.
Oh, no, it's all right. It's all right.
We understand that you have a history of frustration that's influencing how you hear this.
Yeah, it's okay. And I think it was also said that Board President Adair and member Carol Beckerly are really wanting something to come out of this that they can actually help implement. And Kaiten, you sent something in the chat where you said the questions are not being answered. So I think it might be important if you can state specifically the questions that you feel need to be answered tonight, so that we can begin to address those.
I mean, we've already spent like over an hour addressing questions, and still I feel like we haven't been given like concrete answers. And I'm gonna ask a lot of great questions about the structure of this, and I feel like that wasn't correctly answered. And I'm sorry if this is sounding harsh or anything, but I just don't feel like we've spent any of this time productive, and this is our first meeting. This is our first real meeting, despite the fact that we've had 2 community sessions.
Right. So I'm wondering if you could, just to help us out, just to be a little bit more specific about what you need. So you're asking, what is the structure of this group?
I'm not asking for the structure, because I'm just asking, like, we've already spent an hour asking questions, and you guys have been going around circles and our questions have not been fully answered. And I think now we're starting to suggest like ways that we can like get this out to other students. But like the bottom line is that I know that CCS has a very powerful reach, a very massive reach to all of the students, because you guys utilize that reach every day. I get phone dialers, you guys hand out flyers for everything. All these suggestions are things that have already been done. So I feel like I'm just very frustrated, because I know that if you guys wanted to get this information out in that massive reach that you have, you could do it. And we're wasting time making all of these suggestions when you guys already know what you can do. Like, have we even started to do anything on the agenda yet? And it's 7:20.
Actually, we have. This is part of it. We had some ideas about the direction we'd like to go, but we want to make sure that what you're bringing up also gets addressed as well. As I said when I did the overview, we were really wanting to have a conversation about your own experiences individually around safe schools. What did it feel like? What did a safe school feel like when you were going to school or when you're in school? And if you didn't have a safe school experience, then what would you have liked to have happened? So that was one of the questions we wanted everybody to respond to. The other question was, we were going to put you into breakout groups, then to say, if in fact, these are the experiences and opinions that you have about what a safe, how you might define a safe school or describe what a safe school is, what are some of the major concerns that we need to be thinking about as a work group to help us get to the kind of safe school that you are describing would be best for the students, staff, and families of Columbus City Schools. That was what we had hoped to accomplish this evening, so that we would have a framework based on your experiences that would then create a foundation for us to go to the other issues that I mentioned for our second and third meeting.
One of the things I think I'm hearing, and push back if I'm not hearing this accurately, is that we have been talking about the issues that have been made it challenging for you to become actively involved in this process over a period of time, and the skepticism you have about the process. And I'm wondering if, also building on what Kaden said, is if we should move on to the question of what a safe school looks like. And Fran, I'm going to ask in front of you, in front of the whole group. We've also been at this for a really long time, and people might need 5 minutes to breathe and whatever.
Okay, are we up for a break, or Ms. Turner, or do you need to get your question out there before we take?
I was just going to say I've been listening to everyone, and I kind of feel like sometimes when you start a meeting, sometimes a lot of people are used to an agenda, and they like to, me personally too, I like to start the meeting before I start the meeting, start thinking about what I'm going to contribute to the meeting before. So I think we're kind of still all on the same page as to what we're looking for. But I just think, I'm thinking that our goal here is that we're trying to find ways for the schools to be more safe for our children. Mm-hmm. And in order to do that, I know someone said a question is, okay, what's not safe about the schools now? So that's something, a little bit more information that we may need. What's not safe, or what's making kids not feel safe in school? And then come up with some solutions and how we can make kids feel safe in school, and inside of school and outside of school. So maybe that's what we're just kind of missing, is just that foundation, to lay that foundation before we come to the meeting, just a little clarity. I keep hearing that, the clarity of what our job is, so that we can get directly to it and start working on it. But I think some of the things that I'm seeing in the chat, some very good ideas, So I think we're getting there. It's just that it's taken a little bit longer because we didn't have that foundation beforehand. And we keep getting little bits and little bits of it. So I'm taking notes. I was like, oh, and I'm getting more clarity. But I think it just kind of took us a while to kind of get there. And so that's basically all I wanted to say. I know everyone's probably ready for a break. So, but thank you.
Thank you.
I just wanted to say that I don't really understand the need for a break when we haven't really even started the meeting. The most that we've been doing is us asking y'all questions and y'all dancing around the questions, not really answering us. Do you still feel the need to take a break?
I was testing the idea with you all.
I wanted to take a stab at, okay, so I asked a question at the beginning, which we've been talking about for an hour and a half, and I appreciate everyone's input. So I have a sense now what the answer to my question is just from listening to the last hour and a half and being at the last 3 meetings. And I wanted to share it back for the people in charge to say, am I hearing this right? So my sense now is that in the next 3 meetings, so in the 6 hours of time or 6.5 hours, 7 hours we have together, you will facilitate a series of conversations and listen to what everyone on this group says. And then the notes from that conversation will be taken and looked at alongside the results from the survey and will be written up in summary form for then yet another body to take up and work with members of the board to then actually make some recommendations. So this is more like an extended kind of like listening session as opposed to a group that will deliberate, prioritize, and really like come up with whatever is the ultimate suggestions or even write anything up collectively. Is that roughly correct? What am I getting?
No, it's not.
No, that's not correct.
That's not correct. That is what our role is to do. Our role is to collectively deliberate, write up, and make the recommendations. That is what we are to do as a group.
Yeah, there's not another group waiting.
There is no.
No.
This group will make the recommendations that will be presented to the Columbus Board of Education.
Okay. It's just hard to figure out how we're doing that, but okay, let's do it. Let's go to the next step. I agree with, I think it was Mariam who just said, let's keep going because we were just starting that. So let's do it.
So the question that Fran raised earlier and has been implicit in a lot of the comments that you've made is that you have had some experiences being unsafe and that you have some concerns there that need to be addressed. So let's get those out on the table in specific terms.
I said this in the chat, but I'll say it out loud since you've asked the question. I would love to hear from the students first because I think they're outnumbered. And if we are going to honor and center their voices, then let's hear that first because the rest of us adults are going to have plenty to say down the road. So I just want to throw my 2 cents in before people jump in.
Good suggestion. So which of the students would like to start with your particular concerns that you want to make sure we hear?
I'll go
as it relates to
first.
this project.
Yep. I am a senior in Columbus City Schools. For the past 13 years, I have felt unsafe. There have been experiences that not only pertain to me that can't be shared here because they are not here, but there are also experiences that just don't make sense and shouldn't happen to a student, a child. At CCS, we have cops at each school that are said to protect the peace and be used as a resource officer. And yet, at oftentimes, we find that they are the cause of some problems that we are experiencing. We find that we have a resource, as CCS would call them. They tend to be a waste. They tend to be an option that is not needed, sometimes even creating more problems for us. COPS are not an all good alternative to actually listening to students.
And implicit in what you say, but I don't want to put words in your mouth without you being able to spit them out, is that you do want to be listened to by people who you have confidence will hear you.
Yes. Yes.
Marcy, can I ask a question too? You started out by saying that you've been feeling unsafe for about 13 years and that you're a senior now. Can you talk about your own story of being unsafe?
Of course. I'll do something more recent in high school.
Okay.
Let's say I am sitting in class, minding my business. All of a sudden, an SRO, well, really a cop, comes into the classroom and starts searching students' bags. Now, of course, this is allowed. But when you get singled out before your lighter skinned peers, it doesn't feel like it's allowed. And when it's not the first time that it's happened to you, it hurts. When you can honestly notice and admit that it's not a mistake made by them, that it was purely intentional, it hurts. When you realize that school, a place where you're supposed to be safe, is the place that you experience the most discrimination, it hurts.
Thank you. Outside of high school, when you were in middle school, were there times when you didn't feel safe in middle school?
It didn't necessarily pertain to just the cops in school.
Right.
It was also teachers as well sometimes, you know. It's just that people are people. Not everyone that you hire is good. And that we can't just keep looking at the good facts against the bad ones. We have to pay attention to the bad as well, because honestly, if you really care about student safety, you would realize that any amount of bad outweighs the good.
Mm-hmm. I appreciate what you say, because this working group is looking at not the physical, but also the mental and emotional well-being of students as well. So, I appreciate what you said. Thank you.
Which student would like to go next?
I'll go next. Something I would like for us to kind of focus on is the resources, and I'll specify as like counselors and nurses, something for our students, because a lot which you can see in most of CCS schools is that we don't have many counselors or nurses in these schools. They're stretched out, they're overworked, and yes, they're not being paid enough to do their job. And now you have students who are dealing with all types of problems, but you only have one counselor or maybe two or maybe three, whatever it is. But now they have to deal with like 500, 600 students. And then you may only have one nurse that may only even come for half a day. In my experience with my own elementary / middle school, we literally had one counselor who was either gone for half the week, and then she came back for the other half. And then we also had a nurse who fluctuated between schools. They didn't have time to, help every student out. And then, there's a backlash and outlash from students because things are going on with them, and maybe they're not able to talk at home because that's where the situation is happening at. And so I feel like we need to start providing more resources for students to speak out, but also not stretch our workers either. Stretch the ones we have as well.
Samuel, could you share a personal story around this?
Yeah, sure. So I'll go back to high school, which is my recent high school freshman year. I was having complications. It was a dispute between me and some other students about some racial comments made in between a group chat. And when brought up to a main teacher, the main teacher kind of dismissed what the students' racist comments. They kind of played it off playfully, and I felt like that was really disrespectful how they did it, and plus they did it in front of the entire class. So I spoke to the teacher personally, and it ended up becoming in some altercations, which I realized I was partly in the wrong, but I was trying to directly tell the teacher how I felt and other students felt how she was being directly disrespectful. Well, after that, I was immediately sent to the principal's office, and then I was accused of threatening the girl or something. Someone had went down previously and made false accusations against me, saying I threatened the girl and all this stuff. So when I went to talk to my counselor, because the principal and assistant principal had spoke to me briefly, when I went to speak to my counselor about the situation, she was not there, even though we had a scheduled meeting. Found out that she had been stretched out. She had to go to another place. So I wasn't able to talk to her about the situation for at least another week. So, and it was really stressful to me because I felt like I went to every authority I could to get this situation resolved, and they just kind of dismissed it. And then the one person I thought I could talk to was not there.
Thank you very much.
I can go next, I guess. So my personal story that I will share is I attended middle school for 2 years during what I'm sure all of CCS people refer to as a turnaround. This is when apparently Mifflin was in a pretty bad spot, and they were firing all the staff and introducing more security and just introducing more cameras and everything like that. And I personally have seen, and I will call them cops instead of SROs because that's what they are. I have seen cops and those security officials. It's very upsetting to talk about. They were slamming students against lockers, choking, dragging them, pushing them up against things, and overall just interacting with them in a violent way. And this was all in response to things like fights that could be solved in other ways other than violently breaking them up, and other situations where I didn't even think that the violence was necessary at all. Obviously, violence is never necessary, but situations that definitely did not need to be handled that way. And it's just very upsetting for me to talk about, and especially since I've brought this up multiple times. I know that I am not the only one that has experienced this, because Mifflin was considered a bad school. And in CCS, we do have schools that are considered good schools and bad schools. The bad schools that families don't want to send their children to would rather send them to any other CCS school other than this one. They get into lotteries. They don't have to go to these bad schools. And at best, in these good schools, people are like, okay, cops are just unnecessary. They're not really doing anything to help us. They're a waste of resources. But at these bad schools, we've had students come forward with their experiences of violence, of being maced when they had nothing to do with the fight, of being treated violently. And even when we aren't talking about violent interactions, we're talking about emotional intimidation, that cops have a presence in that school. That emotional intimidation and that fear that students have when they interact with cops and see them walking up and down their halls like, oh, am I going to be the one that's next treated violently? So that's my personal experience with that.
Kaden, you started out by talking about Mifflin Middle. So was this happening at Mifflin Middle?
Did everyone hear me?
The cops walking up and down? I just want to make sure.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, as well as the security officers that work there.
Thank you.
And I know that my experience is not an anomaly or just I have only experienced. But again, like I said, I know that a lot of students in all these other schools have experienced things like this similar. So I really feel like these stories should not be dismissed and they should be centered, especially when this is the issue that is affecting us personally. And a lot of us really can't be blamed for being so frustrated at this point when this has been our lives for such a long time.
Sure. Thank you.
I'm gonna tell her.
I'll go next. I'll go next.
You said in the car.
You want me to come?
You come in, or y'all had to talk in there.
Yeah, because you're about to turn your car off. I need to charge my phone. I'll talk next. So it's okay, Grandma. So like Hayden said, there are some good schools and there are bad schools, but I attend one of the schools known as being bad. And so I've always attended the schools known as being bad. So I'm not really in the know of, and I don't have knowledge of good schools. I didn't know there were good schools. So like Kaden said, there are police officers that just walk up and down our halls, which I don't understand the need for when a lot of our schools have safety and security that are there to, okay, when we have safety and security that are there to break up fights and stuff like that, the stuff that they have, the reason that they have police in our schools, or the reason that we also have safety and security, the reason that the safety and security don't do their job is because we have police in our schools. But so I'm sorry, guys. What was I about to say? I was about to say, yes, we need, I feel like we did work very hard to get police out of our schools, and for it to only be temporary, it does hurt my heart. And I feel like the only reason that they took police out of our schools is because it's a pandemic going on. We don't have a need for anybody to be going to school, and we don't have a need for police to be like, they weren't going to fight us on it. We're not going back to school. There's no reason for them to fight us on it. So that's why they gave us, no, come on, come find it. You got to go up there. So, but like Kaden, I'm sorry, y'all, I'm all jumbled right now, but I have to charge my phone. But like Sam said, we need more, the funding that goes towards police, it should go towards counselors and nurses, because at my school we only had about 4 nurses, and it was not even 4, it was 1 for the high schoolers and 1 for the middle schoolers. Yeah, we only had 2 counselors. We had 1 nurse who was barely even there, and the police seemed to be there every day. And not only that, but our teachers are predominantly white in a predominantly Black school, and I don't see how that can be the case. When a personal experience for me is when I was in the 7th grade, I had been kicked out of the cafeteria. I came back to get some items because my mother had come to pick me up. I went back to get some items, and my administrator started to count down. And before I could even leave the cafeteria, an officer, he started coming towards me. So I ran, And as I'm running and I'm about to leave the cafeteria, a teacher stands up who is 3 times my size, stands up and blocks my exit. And so the cop gets a hold of me and he slams me against the wall, puts me in handcuffs, slams me onto the ground. And as I'm struggling on the ground, he puts me in the chokehold and tells me that I'm gonna fall asleep, and he counts down. And I black out, and then I wake up and I'm slammed onto the concession counter, and then I'm pushed over the concession counter into the room in the back. Basically, what I'm trying to say is, and I know I feel like I sound like I'm rambling, but I don't know if y'all know, Ms. Frazier, you're Black, and I don't even know if you can relate to this, because all y'all have been sprouting all night is BS and dancing around all of our questions. Y'all haven't given us any direct answers. But do y'all know how it feels to be a young Black female, a young Black male, and to grow up in Black communities where police who don't even live in your community patrol you, and then to go to school and have them patrol you there too? One day I was sitting in my math class and I looked out the window and I saw a paddy wagon. I don't know if y'all call it that, but it was one of the police vans, and I saw it driving around, and I wondered if I was going to have to witness a shooting that day. I lost my brother to the police. Do y'all know how it feels to have to stand up and fight to get them taken out of our schools? And then for y'all to call this meeting for us, and for y'all to just sit here and not even take us serious. After this meeting is over, I don't even know what you're gonna do. Y'all probably is gonna go to bed or eat dinner. It's not even that I don't know. I know that y'all are not taking us serious. And it hurts. That's all I have to say.
Miriam, this is Miss Frazier, and you must, I'm sorry that you don't feel it, but we really are taking everything that you all are saying, especially the students. We're taking it very seriously.
Well, I couldn't tell. If y'all was taking us so serious, I wasn't here for the last 2 meetings, but this is the 3rd meeting. It took us so long just to start this meeting out, and y'all spent the whole time, y'all spent an hour just having us ask y'all questions, y'all not answering the questions. The last 2 meetings, I wasn't there, but I heard they were, I can't even cuss, but I heard they were poop. Like, y'all really got me over here shaking. Y'all done messed up my nerves, because y'all this whole meeting irritated me. I don't know why I'm here. I don't know what we're doing. Y'all don't have a plan set out. You're not taking any action. Y'all are disorganized. Are y'all getting paid to sit here and make fools of us?
That's what my grandma said. It's certainly not our intention or goal in any way to make fools of anyone. And I can perfectly well understand how, given the pain that you've described and the hurt and the suffering that you've described, that it would be very difficult to assume that we should be taken seriously, or that we are taking you seriously. And one reason Fran and I think of this as the first of 3 meetings. We observed the other meetings that were done, but we wanted to make sure that we're focused on action. And if we don't say anything else, I think we've tried to say it a number of ways. We want this group to be able to recommend specific action steps to be followed up on. And we need to hear from you all in order to be able to do that.
Well, I'm not gonna say I believe your words, because I know that the board is full of stuff. I know that they're not really for the students, and that is the reason that our schools are so messed up now. And I'll say one last thing, and I probably won't leave it at that, but I'll say one last thing, pretend it's my last thing. Get y'all stuff together and get it together now. You only have so much time before the community reaches an outcry. Y'all don't have a bunch of angry people on y'all's hands. My auntie just had a baby and she's not even considering putting her baby in Columbus City schools when she gets old enough. Because y'all are disorganized.
And I don't want any of the adults or any of the people who are directly connected to CCS or trying to any of our anger and frustrations as some sort of disrespect, because it is not disrespect. It is us being so tired, because we've all been CCS students for our entire lives, and this has been our lives, and we've been tired. We couldn't even imagine a future without police and this presence in our schools that makes us feel scared. And I believe that CCS schools can be a safe haven, and they are not a safe haven right now. And I believe that schools should be a safe haven, and that we have the resources and the power to make it a safe haven. And we just do not feel like we are being listened to. And this, I feel like I've already, because this task force took 3 or 4 months to even get off the ground and started, even though it has been a thing for most of the summer. And I just feel like this is disorganized on purpose. This is an attempt to deter change from us. And I don't even know what else to say, but we are allowed to be angry in this space because we are very fed up, and to lay our trauma out, which is so hard to do, to lay our trauma out in front of everyone for everyone to see and to be judged for that instead of to have it fully accepted and centered and uplifted is very frustrating. So.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, Caden, and I worry about that. I mean, I, as a school counselor in the district, I see what you and Miriam and Samuel are saying in some ways, in that, yeah, sometimes it is clear that, you know, it's not just, and I'm not just talking about, you know, police officers. Some of the adults are not fully invested in change. I mean, there are some adults, I'm not going to say it's a large percentage, I don't know, but I hear you're saying that not everybody is fully invested in that change. And I think that's a fact that we have to deal with, that's real. And, you know, there is a culture shift that really has to happen, that I see, for our students to really feel supported. And honestly, I'm hearing both a lot of what's being said and hearing, and then thinking myself about how it's confusing how we have to have a work group to figure out some things. And I really don't like, as much as I value centering student voices, there does come a point where I question, why do we need to have them keep repeating the same thing over and over again? Like, this is not unique to Columbus City Schools. This is not unique to the state of Ohio. This is not, you know, unique to a couple places around the country or a couple different settings or institutions. Like, this is a nationwide, at least, problem, if not a worldwide problem, to which there have been school districts who have made responses to what we're talking about. What that looks like in Columbus City Schools, I think, is a fair question. But I mean, I hear what you're saying, Caden, to have you continuously lay that out over and over again, I have a little bit of a frustration with that myself, because I'm sitting here thinking, like, how do I don't want to cut you off, and how do I support you in, like, laying that out all over again and over again. I am frustrated by that. I don't think it's appropriate. I think that, you know, some of us have to do the work and figure out, you know, what are the facts, what's happening in the schools to our students, what needs to happen to create the change so that they're supported. And for some, like, there's going to be some really tough, I think, answers to that. Some things that people are going to find really uncomfortable. And we need to have those conversations about how our students are going to feel supported. I mean, I was listening to what Samuel's saying about being trying to go to a school counselor and they weren't there. I mean, we have in our elementary schools, our counselor is maybe 2 days a week. For the most part, with some exceptions, a lot of our school counselors, I don't know, people know, a lot of school counselors, nurses, a lot of resources are, they have extra days in buildings if a principal chooses to spend the Title I money in that area. It's not just a given that you have a school counselor or a nurse. I mean, you know, it's not just about me. I'd love to see, like, it makes mine easier if we have smaller class sizes, so every student can have a better relationship with their student, have a better feel for what's going on in their classroom. So I think some of the frustration I'm hearing is a lot. I get we want to get kind of like input and feedback, but it seems like we're really going for a lot of input and feedback here. Like it's a lot. And I think there are, you know, some of it is homework, I think, for the adults. I mean, I really believe that there comes a certain point where it's like, we shouldn't have to hear the students continue to tell us this over and over and over again, to really know that, you know, we need to come up with a solution. I think part of the frustration is that's not what I think for a lot of people, what they see Columbus City Schools as being good at. We have a strategic plan. There's always a strategic plan. There's always a new strategic plan. Like, it gets changed. And so, and when leadership changes, as it often does, there's an impetus for a new strategic plan. So yeah, some of this I can see the frustration, this just being a delay for, like, oh, then we're going to have this recommendation. And I think what Samuel's asking earlier about, could some of this just be disregarded? I think that's a very real possibility that could happen, regardless of if there's a few board members that are in favor. I think that, yeah, I think that what I'm hearing sounds like that's a real possibility. And I don't like that. You know, I don't like hearing that our students' perspectives can be, after this process of putting their emotions out there and putting out, you know, what they're seeing, they're feeling, their experiences, it could just possibly get disregarded. You know, that doesn't sit right with me. So I really hope there is some strength in these recommendations, that they get taken not just seriously, but fully. And yeah, I hope there's some motion. I don't know if that's even in context with what we're supposed to be doing right now, because I'm not even really sure about the agenda either. But yeah, I just want to support you all. I mean, that's what I got in school counseling, you know, and I wrote a list of some things that keep me from doing that, you know, different years I might do more in this building than that building. But as a school counselor, I'm responsible for scheduling, for 504 plans, test proctoring, intervention planning, evaluation, sometimes technology support if someone needs it, because they don't have anyone else to contact or talk to about that. Social emotional learning lessons. Some teachers are starting to do more of that, but, you know, I'm doing my own. That sometimes that's something I love to do, honestly. But, you know, I have a caseload right now of, I'm in one school counselor in a building with about 400 students. The American School Counselor recommendation has been for years, one school counselor to 250 students. And that number is for, like, the average for everybody, right? So, you know, meaning that schools that need more intensive support should probably have more school counselors than 1 to 250. So I don't know. I'm not here to complain about, you know, my job. I do love my job in many ways, and it's just, but it's tough. I mean, it can be difficult because I do want what I got into and was trained in is supporting students. And yeah, myself, along with many other positions of people and teachers and et cetera, we're all pulled in a million different directions. Partly, I think, because there's, you know, not enough people, not enough adults per student who really are trying to make an impact. So I'll end there.
Thank you, Mr. Powers. Ms. Gordon, you had your hand up.
I partly wanted to also mention mental health and counseling, like Mr. Powers had said, because yeah, at my school, I've had the privilege to be at one of the good schools. And also my race has protected me from experiences with SROs and whatnot. But yeah, with mental health, I mean, even at my school, we had two counselors, and we recently added one more counselor just this year, but it seemed like there wasn't as much support as there should be to be helpful. And I know one of the counselors was extremely overworked. And I can't speak for if the other counselor was or not. And then I also know that a lot of students tend, at least the students that I know, definitely tend to struggle with mental health. And I think that's becoming a much bigger issue in kids nowadays. And I think we need to make sure to put an extra focus on that, because I've had some struggles with mental health, and I went to school counseling services. And one time I did not receive very helpful support. And then the other time I did receive support that was helpful, but obviously the school was limited with how much they could provide. And I know my family was privileged enough that we could actually get support from outside of school, but I also know a lot of students who just aren't able to do that, whether their family isn't supportive of mental health or because they just can't afford it.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Gordon. Ms. Turner, you had your hand up.
Oh, they may have been up before, but I just wanted to say to the students, I apologize that you have been failed in some sort in this school system. And for the students that are saying, I'm in a bad school, you're not in a bad school. You're in a school that does not have the resources to support your needs. So I just wanted to make that distinction. There's not bad schools, good schools. There's just schools that have more resources and more tools that you need. So I think I've mentored in schools for many years, and I've been in quite a few what you call your bad schools. But what I noticed is that you had very caring teachers for the most part. You did not have the resources that you needed. And that was a question I'd always ask about books and about technology. And I saw the difference in the disparities within the different schools in the different areas of town. And I just want to really apologize, because you should feel safe in your schools, inside your schools and outside your schools. So there's a disconnect somewhere. So I really hope that you don't have to keep pouring yourself out and exposing yourself and nothing is being done to help you. So I'm hoping that this group will take back this information and do something to help the students and help the schools, because I think there's bigger problems, so many bigger problems in some of the schools. And it seems like they need more resources. I mean, like you say, mental health, technology, just getting help, the more the resources in there versus just protection. If you're even getting that protection, you need to feel safe in the place that you're going to learn. And so I just wanted to say that I think you're brave for sharing your stories and exposing yourself. And I truly hope that this group can get you some of the answers that you deserve.
Thank you, Ms. Turner. Mr. Wilson?
Yeah, I've been listening all night and definitely appreciate all the things that the student have had to say tonight. I'm going to ask that the opportunity be given to this board to do some good. I mean, we all have volunteered to be here, strictly volunteering. And until we get the information that all parts of this board contains, and then we can develop some understanding, then we can make some decisions. I am a assistant principal at Champion Middle School. Might be considered one of the tougher schools. But I'm also a retired Columbus police officer. So I've seen both sides of the fence. I come from an inner city schools growing up. Went to Barry when it existed. Anybody around long enough to know that school? And lived in a high poverty neighborhood. So I know what some of your challenges are. I've been through some of them. I've seen some on inside and outside. But what I'm asking, I know you're frustrated and I know you want change immediately. And I think the board has done a good job tonight of listening to you. The meeting has been totally about you, and that's what it should be. We're not deviating from that at all. But until we get the information that all parts of this board and committee has, we can't develop the understanding of why this occurs, why that occurs, why this person in that position, and to make an informed decision. Because some of the things, there's not 100% bad officers. Some of the situations that they're placed in might precipitate them being in a bad situation, committing a bad thing. And that's our opportunity right now to make those changes. They may be in, they may be out, but their role may be changed. We have the power right now to create what we want to create to make it safe for all. So I'm just asking to give this committee a chance. Tonight, we went back and forth about the logistics of how we got here, why it took so long, why more people are involved. We are here now. So I'm just imploring you to, at this point, let's go forward, divulge, debate, get some information, come to a good understanding, and make an informed decision and recommendation that helps all. I worked all day, and like many of you have, and I volunteered to be here, so no one's getting paid. Everybody has an invested interest in doing good for Columbus City Schools. So I just wanted to share that, and I think if we can get more into the discussion and information process, we'll be fine, even in this short amount of time. But we have to take where we are right now and go forward. We can't keep going back about this happened, that happened. We have to go forward from here if we're going to do anything productive with this group. That's all I had to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Anybody else?
I had just
Hi.
sorry, go ahead.
Thank you. Just to backtrack off of Mr. Wilson. What you were saying earlier about having us consider why these officers act the way they do, I personally feel like that would honestly be almost a waste of our time. Because what if this happens?
I want to cut you off. I ask you
Excuse me. Because what if this happens again? We can't just keep sitting on the hope that, oh, they'll be good this time, and put them in front of our children, and put them in front of my fellow students and peers, just to be put into danger again.
I'm not advocating for or against. What I'm looking for is information. I'm looking for the information because I'll give you this. All your high school resource officers, Columbus City Schools has no decision-making rights on who that officer is.
Yeah, you're right, which is why we shouldn't utilize them in the first place.
This is an opportunity to investigate that, to find out why, and if that's something that can change. And then the role that an officer plays in that school, like everyone has said, we have resource officers. They should be keeping trouble out than dealing with trouble within. So those are all different things that can be done and discussed, and better decisions can be made, or they may be out completely. I am not advocating for or against. I want the information to get out, the process, and see if we come up with something that works.
Okay.
Thank you. Ms. Handelman?
Oh yeah, thanks. I was just curious. I'm a Columbus City School graduate and a teacher now in the district, specifically to support social emotional learning and teaching at the very little level, like 5 and 6 and 7-year-olds, right? So we have social emotional learning standards now that we can support the elementary school folks. But I'm curious because as I'm a Linda McKinley graduate, and I don't remember, I got a lot of disciplinary things like Saturday schools and things when I was in school. And I don't remember there being a student bill of rights that would support like a student perspective. I taught in New York City before coming back to Columbus, and I taught in a school with restorative justice and those kind of policies where everybody had a voice in the dispute. So when we're thinking about those ideas that have been brought, those real lived experiences that have been brought up, where students didn't feel they had a voice and things were done to them with no explanation. Like, I remember that as a Franklin Alternative Middle School student. I remember that as a Lyndon McKinley High School student. You know, you just kind of see what happens and you hope it doesn't happen to you. But in the restorative justice framework, everybody has a voice, but it means that the adults in the building have to be held accountable for their actions. And that's sometimes hard. You have to shift that culture. So I'm just curious if Columbus has a Bill of Rights for students and how it's communicated.
I can,
is there,
somebody here from what I know.
Cheryl, this is Cheryl. In the Student Guide to Success, and this may actually be a document as you all go through your work group, because we lay out what we say we're going to do, right? And so I think there's some space to be able to have attention put to that and to make a call out as it relates to that. But in the Student Guide to Success, which is on the website this year, there's a space where it talks about rights of students and parents. There's a section about what students ought to be able to expect. And certainly one of them that's listed says that the school that you attend will be a safe place. And so it is a good question that you raise. And I think this may be a document that the work group takes a look at to see where we are and how we are measuring up as it relates to some of the things that we say are rights to our students to be able to have on a daily basis, as well as our parents and staff.
I'm sorry if I may interject. Just because we have this student right thing on paper that Ms. Ward was speaking of does not mean that it is being followed through by staff and officers. I can tell you firsthand that teachers have told me that a student, when they walk inside the building, that they lose all of their rights. That when a student goes inside of a building, they have no rights, and that they are subject to whatever a teacher or officer does. I have been told this. So I'm sorry, but a student bill of rights just doesn't carry enough power on its own for it to do anything, in my opinion.
I agree. So when I made a statement that said it's a place of resource for the committee to look at and to hold accountable as to what it says. And I think it's a very valuable place for this group to sit, to be able to have conversations about what we say we're going to do and whether we're measuring up to it.
I'm sorry, but once again, students can't even hold their teachers or officers accountable for what they have done. There is no system in place for us to place grievances with them. If we try to go to a different teacher that we may have trust, they end up telling us there's nothing we can do.
So one of the things this group could recommend is that that's one of the changes that has to happen. And then put in place a process for making sure that it does happen. I think a lot of us recognize that that has been a real challenge, a real problem. And the question is, what are we willing to recommend about how to make that different? And there are different ways to approach that. Ms. Handelman mentioned the restorative justice model. There's other approaches that could be considered by this group as a different way of approaching the relationship between staff and students.
I think something Mercy might be pointing out, if you can tell me if I'm right or wrong on this, but the rights are there, sure. But with the power dynamic that exists between the adults and children,
that's right.
What's the recourse, and is it enough that students really feel like their rights are respected, regardless if they do have those rights on paper? So while that exists, perhaps, I think, and Mercy, let me know if that's kind of where you're getting at, is like the feeling is that with police in schools, that's not something that's a feeling that a lot of students have, is that they feel that they have that right to safety. And I've heard that too. Some of the adults putting forth an idea that conflicts with those rights. So, yeah.
It's not a feeling, it's a fact.
Mhm.
It's just that staff and officers just do not respect our opinion. And that's just what's happening. We can't do a single thing about it besides relive our trauma to this group who seems to have no idea what's going on still.
Can I say something?
Mr. Ham?
Basically, I've been a resource officer for 24 years, like I stated earlier. I understand some of the students' concerns. I've seen them over in 24 years. I've seen very good administrators who had the kids and the students and the parents at their first hand. That was their priority. I've seen others that it was a job for them. I've seen it in every other aspect, safety and security. I've seen all safety and security guys that were these kids trusted. They were about the kids. They were there for the kids. They were always an advocate for the kids, and the kids flocked to those. But then in the end, there was other ones that just agitate and stir the pot. We'll get to police officers. Like I said, 24 years, I've seen a lot of good officers come through that generally cared about the students and were advocates for the kids. I've also seen officers, like I'm saying, in every other profession, there's good and there's bad. There's officers, yeah, I'm going to be the first to admit to these young ladies and young gentlemen, there's officers that shouldn't be in this job or shouldn't have been in this job over the 24 years that we've been in existence. But unfortunately, like Mr. Wilson stated, it's not a contractual thing that they can choose and pick who they want. Do I agree with it? Probably not. But unfortunately, that's been what our union has said. Just like teachers and everyone else in this district, they go about and they handpick who they want. They choose who they want. And a lot of times that doesn't work out either. You get them in the buildings and it's not good for the students. It's not good for the staff. It's just not good for the climate. Somewhere along the way, we have to figure out what Columbus Public School is going to do. We either are going to be about the kids and preach safety and get the right people involved. And I'm talking from the top all the way to the bottom that are going to put the kids first and the education first. I mean, I get kids that come to me and complain. And I tell them, I said, look, I've yet to see a parent ever get suspended. Find your advocate, find a parent that's going to fight for you or somebody in the building. You're not going to win that fight, and they're not. I'm going to be the first to admit it. Very seldom are these kids ever going to win an argument. But hopefully they will use an advocate, a parent, someone that's got their interest in heart and step up for them. And with Columbus Public Schools, that's what you have to have. I hate to say it. I'm a former student. I went to Brookhaven High School. I had a daughter that went through this district, and it hasn't changed. The kids are not always given what they should be given.
I would like to start off by saying, for us to have a task force started and formed around us getting police out of our schools, it does hurt a lot, and it makes a lot of us uncomfortable to have officers and retired officers here in this meeting. I would also like to say that at this point, I do not think that Columbus City Schools will change, that they will become good, because at the beginning of the school year, before the pandemic even started, I also want to say that I never knew that there was student rights written down on a piece of paper, and that we actually had because like Mercy said, y'all are irritating me, because like Mercy said, I've literally been told by teachers, by my whole school, that us as students do not have rights when it comes to police and to the teachers. I literally had, at the beginning of the school year, they called us, they called all of us ninth graders down to the auditorium just to tell us that 95% of us would not be passing. So I'll say it again. I don't know what the goal of this task force is. I don't know what we're doing anymore. And yes, it makes me very uncomfortable, and also hurts to know that we have retired officers and officers here on this task force, a part of this meeting right now. That makes me very uncomfortable and very upset. I don't know what y'all are doing. Y'all are so disorganized. I don't know whether to laugh, to cry. My heart is about to pound out of my chest, and just, let me pass the mic. Go on, somebody else.
Thank
I would just like to say something. I would just like to
I
say
think, I
something.
actually think, sorry, Sam, go ahead.
Mr. Kennedy.
Am I allowed to say something?
Go ahead, let the students speak. Go ahead.
Sure.
Yeah, no, I would just like to share how I'm personally feeling right now, because I feel like I'm not trying to be rude. I feel like most of the adults in the room are kind of understanding where the students are coming from. And maybe I can just tell from your facial expressions or by the way your tone, but I feel like, and I just won't give out, but I feel like some of y'all are like hearing what we're saying, but then it's like tossing the feelings out the door. And I can just, and it's not that, I feel like you guys, and the people that are doing, I feel like you're not doing it on purpose, but the way that you respond to the students about their personal trauma, the tone is like almost disregarding and has a little disrespect in the depths of which it's coming from. And I know like some of the adults probably don't mean it, but it kind of sounds like it's kind of pushing the students that are in this group and trying to placing them as a child. Like, oh, like this is kind of like, oh, you're just a child. Like there's better things out there and all this. And we know that some schools have better resources than the others. We're understanding that, but we're trying to explain where the resources that we have for the schools that don't have that much, there's worse things going on that we need to try and change and fix. And that we probably should change without all our schools. And another thing I would like to say is bringing up like COPS and our SROs. As a part of this organization I'm a part of, CPD out of CCS, when our group officially filed for the termination of the Columbus Police Department contract to be suspended as of right now until until the CCS board makes their decision. We did that because based on our research, which a lot of people asked for, is that the cops were doing more harm to the students than they were doing in the so-called protecting. And there's a lot of good schools out there, obviously, but everybody seems to like maintain focus. Oh, we have this one good school. Let's project about how great they're doing and all that. But then we disregard all the bad things that are happening to all these students. And that's what I feel like is going on. Y'all are like, some of y'all are just hearing it and then y'all are tossing it to the side. And that's where I'm feeling the disrespect at. But I think most of y'all are getting it and y'all are understanding and y'all are compassionate. But some of y'all in this meeting are just saying things with a disrespectful tone without acknowledging that you're doing it. Okay, in response to students' trauma. That's all I have to say. Sorry.
Thank you. Ms. Johnson, you had your hand up for a while.
Yeah, I did. One, I want to thank all the students for speaking. I know when I asked you guys to speak first and talk about your concerns, I hope you know that I wasn't asking you to lay bare all of your personal trauma stories, you know, for the sake of this work group, because I think we all know stories. So I just wanted to say thank you again for being brave and speaking up. Secondly, I never said my role or anything, so I'll do that quickly since we're at the end of the meeting, sort of. But I'm an attorney with the Legal Aid Society of Columbus, and I represent students in all of Franklin County, but obviously some students with CCS in school removal cases, so suspensions, expulsions, and I also do a lot of advocacy around disability, students with disability. And I bring that up to say that like a lot of these issues come up in my cases, so I would love to talk more about that at further meetings, which brings me to my last point, which is in order to feel like these meetings are going to be productive going forward, I think I'd like to clarify or amend my statement at the beginning of the thing, which is to just ask, like, before the next meeting, is it possible for us to get an agenda in advance so that we can start thinking about these things? Some of the data that we've been asking for in the chat, I saw a couple of people ask for it, and I thought those were great suggestions. I'd love to know, and maybe this is public record. I should know this as an attorney, but you know, whatever, sorry, I'm asking for it now. Can we get like data on like what the budget is, what we can even work with, how much is being spent on certain resources and certain things? Because I think we can guess or we can play at it because we have people who are from all different walks of life on this workforce. But I think I always approach my cases with data, evidence, and facts. And I think that everyone would feel like we're getting things done or at least accomplishing something at the next meeting if we have data, figures, and facts to study and prepare for an agenda that we have in advance. So if that's possible, I would love to see that. I know we're going to get the reports from the community sessions that I did attend to. I'd love to see that when that's prepared, but I think that there's other data that I think, maybe it was Mr. Wilson, maybe somebody else mentioned that like would be helpful to inform our conversations going forward. And I would just want to see if we can just get that, because I think that will help myself and maybe the students and other people feel like we're not just dancing around stuff, we're not just talking to talk, that we're actually looking at something, having a concrete agenda and actually talking through it. Does that make sense? That's all I wanted to say.
Sure. Sure. We will definitely work on that. The chats are being saved, so we'll be able to go through all of the chats that you have and make sure that we're finding a way to answer or respond to those, at least in terms of getting ready for the next meeting.
Can there also be some sort of document that outlines a timeline or some sort of process for actually producing this document that we're supposed to produce? Because I may be alone, but I still don't understand exactly how that document is going to come into being, if we're all going to have a chance to talk about it after it's written, or how it's even going to work. And I think that would help me knowing where we're going if there's some sort of plan for actually producing the document, who's going to write it, who's going to review it, etc.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Price.
Kennedy, were you trying to get in?
I was. A lot of it's been answered. But I think to a lot of the students' point, like in education in general, this is always an adult problem. This isn't a student problem. This isn't anything that, you know, a deficit view of students. It's what the adults are doing or not doing in schools that causes these situations. I know the district started, or the state started a while ago with the Ohio Improvement Process, where they were looking at student achievement data and what type of resources can be targeted for students. I think the same practice needs to take place as it relates to social emotional learning, mental health, and those types of things. What are we doing for those students in these districts that, to quote someone, said bad schools or good schools? What if those schools are considered bad and all those things? What are we doing? What are the adults in those buildings doing to ensure that students are getting the resources and the things that they need to make that improvement, right? Like, so if everything that the students are saying is valid, saying it time and time again, we are literally talking about adult issues and adult problems. And so I don't know if this means that there should be a member of the OEA part of the work group, or should things be running to the recommendations be provided to the OEA, since they have a lot of power in terms of how teachers respond and interact and work with students and families. Because, you know, there is a power differential in a lot of things that we're talking about. So yes, the board can make recommendations. Yes, we can make recommendations to the board. But there's a lot of collective bargaining power that prohibits a lot of things that we may recommend. So unless we're going to start addressing the total structure and the total system, to some of the students' point, it's like pissing in wind. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Mr.
Can I ask a clarifying question related to data? I see in the chat there was a request for out of school suspension, in school suspension, and attendance. Are you looking for that for the 1920 this past school year? That becomes important when we ask for data. They always want to know what school years are you looking at.
Well, certainly the 1920 or even like the past 3 years, so we can kind of get some type of aggregate and make determinations accordingly.
And did I also hear from a social emotional lens, the district does have some partners. Buildings are able to do partners individually, building to building or building to agency. There are some larger partnerships that we have for mental health, like Directions for Youth, North Community Counseling. Is it the desire of this group to know what those larger partnerships are and the number of schools? Would that be helpful? I don't want to take down a road that's not helpful, but I also want to clarify to make sure if it is helpful, that we try to support that data for this work group.
Yes, please. I think that would be really helpful because I'm really not aware of what everything in CCS is doing. And I think all data that kind of gives us a baseline of where we are right now on every aspect would be extremely helpful.
Thank you.
I have a quick question. Will there be a summary of this meeting? So from listening to the students, they have given us quite an emotional experience about what they are experiencing at school, but they have come up with great ideas too, like already from tonight, like this grievance system. We really need to look at that. You know, the rights of the students, we need to look at that. So I have a ton of notes of these ideas that the students have. So can we get a summary of these ideas so we can discuss them at the next meeting? Because I'm looking at these notes and I'm like, oh, we should talk about this next week. We should talk about this possibly next week. Or is the agenda set already for next week? So, I mean, I really want to look at this grievance system and the rights of the students, and really the SEL, social emotional learning, and where are those like what schools have different programs, and do we have data that's supporting if these programs are working at those schools, and or should the district have a district-wide program like restorative justice, because there's several different programs out there. And my biggest concern is how do we get students help now? Obviously they've had trauma, but are we putting more counselors in schools now? Why are we waiting? I guess that's my other question. What funds are available now that we can help students now?
Thank you, Carissa. Actually, some of the things that you mentioned, I had also wrote down in big circles. Restorative justice practices, grievance process, an advocate for students, more student voice, rethinking the student guide to success and the student bill of rights. I had written those down specifically because I thought that those were going to be important to look at. So thank you very much.
So speaking just briefly to restorative justice, restorative practices, the district did have a big contract with the International Institute for Restorative Practices, which came in and did some training facilitation. It might still be doing some with certain buildings, but I don't know. To me, it's, I don't really have a good understanding of like, what's the long-term plan, follow-up, accountability as far as that piece is concerned. I don't know if there is.
We can find that out.
So that's just something that I've been wondering the whole time. I mean, I'm one of the people who got trained, and I'm still, I don't know how much of that was the pandemic stuff, threw things into a loop. But yeah, I just don't know where we're at with that.
And one of the things that the survey is going to help us with is one of the things that participants in the survey were able to do is identify where on a continuum from more authoritative as opposed to more restorative justice approaches, where they see themselves each preferring the schools to go. So we'll have a sense of the extent to which people are interested in going that direction through the surveys.
Sorry, maybe it's a small point of contention, but authoritative and restorative are the same. So having that accountability and support are okay.
Bad choice of words on my part, but
sorry, but not maybe you meant, yeah. We don't want. I mean, I don't think anybody wants an authoritarian school environment or thinks that's a great idea. I would hope not.
Our time, it really is up, but Ms. Whalen, I wanted to give you an opportunity to maybe, unless somebody really does want to have the last word, give it to you, and then we'll give the platform back to the two co-chairs. But Ms. Whalen, if you want to.
No, I'm happy to give the last word to someone else to round it out and to really mention what it is that the group needs in order to make and create opportunities the next time we meet. So anybody who has an idea in addition to data, an agenda, and clarity on ownership, are there any other items that we as a group need to make the greatest progress the next time?
I don't really have an idea right now, but I was going to ask a question. I was wondering if one of you chairs of the task force was actually taking notes.
Yeah, we all were.
Okay, just making sure.
Ms. Whalen, what I have is an agenda, data for the past 3 years, evidence, facts, timeline for this document. How do we get students to help now? What schools have different programs? Who are the mental health partners? That's what I have written down so far that I've heard from the work group members about what they'd like to receive. Are there other documents or other pieces of information other than counselor ratio to students at each school?
Can you also provide some information about what the new student health and wellness funds that were granted to the district have been going toward, and who's making the decisions about how those funds are being spent?
Health and wellness funds?
Yes, I believe they're called, I forget the specific term. It's a new thing in the latest
it's
budget.
like $2.5 million that came from a grant, and it's the Columbus City Schools and Nationwide Children's Hospital.
Okay.
Well, we might be talking about the same thing. I'm talking about what the legislature allocated to every school district.
Oh, you're talking about that group of funds, yes.
Yeah.
The state legislature also appropriated some money, but there's also a grant with Children's Hospital.
Are there any more questions or suggestions for us to jot down?
I'm so sorry. I should have said this earlier, but do y'all think it's possible to send the notes out to everyone in like a document or something?
So what will happen is, and this was also the basis of why we didn't have an initial agenda, because we also needed to figure out how everybody operates. And so now knowing what the consensus of how everybody wants to operate and what's going to be the best method, there will be a summary that comes out. In addition to the summary of tonight, it will also be some action items that we will be looking at with the data. So our expectation will be that once that's sent out to you guys have a chance to review. And so that once we meet again on October 15th, when we start at 6 p.m., we will be able to have roll call and jump right into each item and be able to utilize that meeting to start to understand, formalize, and capture what these recommendations look like. Unless if there's any questions or concerns.
So when will we be receiving that summary?
So the summary, there's 4 of us taking notes aside from, I think, Miss Carissa. And so what will happen is that we're going to use all of these notes to make sure that we send out structured, detailed recap.
No, I just want like a date.
It will be out by, today's Thursday. We will have them out by Monday.
Okay.
We'll have the summary out by Monday.
Cool.
Are there any other questions?
Hey, Kimberly.
Okay, if not, I want to thank everybody for participating. You are valuable, and as a community, we have a lot of work to get done and for it to get done right. And so I want to thank you guys for sharing your evening with us. Once again, the summary will be out by Monday, and as we could get the remaining information, we will make sure that we send that out to you guys so that you guys can synthesize it. And when we meet again collectively, we can start to get this work done. Thank you.